Paul appeals to Caesar. He really didn't need to appeal to Caesar, but he didn't know it. That the Roman governors who had heard his case so far weren't really taking the accusation seriously, and they were about to let him off. But what Paul did know is that if he appeals to Caesar, that he was going to get a free trip to Rome, where he would be able to proclaim the good news of Jesus, which was kind of his whole end goal in the first place, was to end up in Rome where he could preach the good news of Jesus. As a Roman citizen, it was your right to appeal to Caesar, but it was a kind of dangerous game because you were putting your whole fate into the hands of one man. And often that one man would judge slightly harshly compared to what a local authority might do. And so Paul was putting his hands into the fate of Caesar, but he didn't care because he knew that he was going to be gathered together with the other people who would be awaiting trial or punishment in Rome. They would be put under the guard of a centurion, maybe a few other guards. They would be setting sail across the Mediterranean to get to Rome. Now, he would have gone by boat because in Paul's day, a boat was the fastest way to get around the Roman world, especially the Mediterranean Sea. And so it was kind of like, for us, getting on an airline. It wasn't cheap, it wasn't comfortable, but it was relatively fast compared to land travel in their day. The only thing that was different was it was dangerous, especially if you left at certain points in the year. In the late fall, after the mid-October point, if you left and you were going on to the Mediterranean, you could be hit by a storm at any given moment with no warning, and it could wreck your ship. So they were taking a big risk to leave at the time that they were leaving. But the captain knew this. Paul still wanted to get his 2 cents, so Paul calls the captain and says, we're heading into dangerous territory here if we're going to finish this last leg of the trip in this time. There's a possibility we'll hit a storm. Paul was an experienced traveler, he knew this, but the captain didn't listen to him. In those days, any ship that was carrying grain from Egypt to Rome, most likely from Egypt to Rome, would have gotten a huge payday if they had taken the risk to get it to Rome before the winter months. And so the captain was taking the risk so that he could get a big payday, big bonus on the other end. So they leave to go, and lo and behold, Paul was right. They hit a huge storm, and they were at threat to be wrecked. Everybody on the ship was miserable, and they all were fearing for their lives. But one night, as Paul was there, sleeping on the cramped deck of this ship, he was incredibly tired and sleepy and miserable, but he has a vision. And he sees an angel sitting next to him on the ship, and the angel tells him that no one is going to lose their life, that God is going to rescue them. And so when he wakes up, he tells everybody what he had seen, and he starts encouraging them to eat the food stores because they weren't going to be saved. So he says, let's eat as much as we can, get our bellies full, so that we'll be nice and healthy and ready for whatever comes next. They see land the next day, and they know that they can get to the land. So they begin letting down their anchors to slow their approach to the land so that they won't wreck. But they didn't see, underneath the water, a little ways out, a reef, and the boat gets caught on it. And it begins to get smashed apart by the waves, and everybody has to go overboard and swim to land. Now, the locals on this island, Malta, see what happens, and they come out immediately to begin to help. But Paul, being the guy that he was, wanted to help too. And so he begins to gather firewood, and he begins to put together a fire that could help warm everybody and dry everybody up. And so as he's doing this, a viper comes out from the logs and bites him on his hand. When the locals see this, they think, wow, this guy has escaped death in the sea, and yet he's gotten to land and he's been bitten by a viper. He must have done something terrible to the gods that they're chasing after him this way. And they watch him for the rest of the night to see if he'll just kill over at some point, and he never does. He seems to have no ill effect at all from the viper. And they're amazed that he isn't affected because they knew that this was a poisonous snake, that he should have died from the bite. The next day they go and they visit the governor of the island. As they see the governor of the island, they recognize that his son is ill, gravely ill, and Paul offers to pray for his son. And he goes and he prays over his son, and immediately his son is made well. which buys them favor with the local authorities. And so they spend the rest of their stay on Malta waiting for the spring when it would be safer for them to travel in kind of luxury. They were well taken care of by the Roman governor on the island there. Paul eventually gets to Rome, and he spends 2 years in house arrest in Rome. This affords him all sorts of ways to do ministry. As he was just under house arrest, he was able to have people come and meet with him, and he was able to meet with the local Christian leaders and Jewish leaders that were there in town and share the gospel with them and help organize and train their leadership. In fact, we know today pretty closely where he stayed, right in ancient Rome. Archaeologists have unearthed it, and they believe that they've found the room where he would have been held as a prisoner. So he was there for 2 years, and then we don't know what happened. The story ends there. Luke doesn't tell us what happened to Paul after that. Now, there's lots of different guesses as to why we don't know what happens to Paul after, but we'll get to that in the next video.